Okay, so this is section 4.0, theorem 4.0.1. If a row of a matrix is 0, then the determinant is 0. And for them, they say proof, they say it just comes straight from the definition. Now, the reason I had some of this written out was, I was ready to say, well, gosh, no, I don't. It's not clear. I guess maybe I'm just not quite bright enough to see it so plainly. And then I thought, oh wait, maybe their definition was such that no. So I stopped it and started over, and because I sat there looking at their definition for a while. The definition is based on the first row. So if you said up here, instead of if a row, if you said the first row is 0, then I would say it definitely comes from the definition. Now, it kind of does later, but so when they use this definition, they say determinant of A, and they use A11 times the minor 1 of A, and then minus A12 times that minor 1, 2A, and so forth. You see, they're using row 1. And so if it's all 0, then yes, obviously from the definition, you get 0 for a determinant. Now, what if it's a different row? Well, in that case, I guess you could argue it comes from the definition, but it's not as obvious, right? So because it's buried in here in the minors. And so what would happen is, these minors are determinants themselves, and so you would have to go down recursively until you get to the right row. Now, at some point, that row, right, if you're always using the top row of the thing you're working with, so for instance, suppose you have a matrix that's, A11, A12, and so forth, maybe A21, A31, and then maybe a row of zeros here. So these go across. Well, what's going to happen is the definition is going to be based on the first row, and then the minors are going to be made up of pieces of this part. But those minors are determinants, and so they, in turn, for each of those, they're going to take a row, part of a row or whatever, and use this definition up here for determinant and work on that. But those are not 0. And then their minors are going to be based on this row. And then finally, the minors of this one are going to be based on that row. And it's going to keep on going, I guess. But the minors are finally going to be based on this row. And so all the minors based on that row will be 0. Okay. Well, then that means that moving back up, all the minors here will be 0, and then moving back up, all the minors there will be 0, and moving back up, all the minors based, for that will be 0. And so really, there's a bit of an argument. Now, I'm not going to worry about that argument because they have some other theorems that will help us out and make this a much easier kind of proof anyway. But in the end, this this will be, I don't, proving from here, I don't think is a simple thing of just saying, hey, look at the definition. I think there's more to the proof. You can kind of see why this ought to be the case with the zeros. Certainly, if you put all those zeros in the first row, then it's obvious. Well, if they're in the second row, then all those minors would be zero. If they're in the third row, then all those minors would be zero, and it would just stack up. But again, I don't think it's obvious that, if the fourth row here is zero, that from the definition, it doesn't just jump out at me that you would get a zero for a determinant. So we'll come back to theorem 4.01. But for now, they say, hey, it just follows from the definition. So they don't really prove anything yet. And then they also point out that there's a similar theorem. We could exchange row for column, and that will also be the case. But again, they say, well, that would take some induction, a little simple proof of induction. But once again, there are some other theorems that then just end up making that a very simple answer, a simple proof. So we won't worry about that proof. But for now, we'll just take it as a fact that if I have all zeros for a row or all zeros for one column, then that determinant would be 0. Okay. Now, another way to see that is if I have all zeros for a row, I know that matrix is singular. And this whole determinant idea is based on singular versus non-singular. Okay, so the determinant, is non-zero if it's non-singular. So then, it also is kind of leading us to see that, a row of zeros would make the determinant 0. So that's all I'm going to say right now on theorem 4.0.1. And maybe you think it was too much, but there we go.